Kevin Doyle. I wanted to introduce myself in anticipation of our conversation this afternoon. I hope it serves you maybe to just get to know me a little bit better as you get your head around who I am and my ministry and my life. These are big decisions, and I'll be praying for you. So I just want to take a few moments and talk about my life and my journey, and again, just hopefully to help make our conversation this afternoon a little bit more productive and give you a sense of a place to start asking me questions. So my family and I'm married to Danae. We've been married for almost 21 years, and we live in San Antonio, Texas. I serve at a church called Christ Church right now, have for soon to be 5 years. We love this church very much. It has been a joy to be here, and I have 4 children. Michaela is my oldest. She is newly married. She's 20 years old, newly married and living in Louisville, Kentucky. Then I have Brooklyn, who is 18. She's a senior in high school. Silas, who is 17, who is a junior in high school. And Solomon, who is 15, who is a sophomore in high school. So we've got 3 high schoolers, and one already has flown the nest and is married and enjoying her life. So we are really thankful to the Lord for our family, and really love this season of life with our kids. I was born in a pastor's home. My dad was served in ministry for 30 plus years, and my grandfathers were both pastors as well. We came out of a denomination called the UPCI, United Pentecostal Church International. That's where my grandfathers, and early on my father, pastored on the West Coast. And it is what I consider to be kind of a Pentecostal cult. They understand the means of salvation to be accompanied by the evidence of speaking in tongues, and that is salvation. They're oneness modalists, so I'm sure you're familiar with some of this. So when I was 13, my father became convinced of the doctrine of the Trinity, and he left that denomination and moved my family, my mother and father, and I have one younger sister, moved us to Mississippi. My mother had grown up in Louisiana in the Southeast, and so we had some family connections there. And he took a non-denominational, kind of a charismatic church in Mississippi, mostly African American, and pastored there for quite some time. That is where I spent my teenage years and my young adult years as well. After touring as a teenager with a band for about 3 years, I came back home in 2002 and became the worship pastor at that church, serving alongside my father. I got married 2003, and my wife and I, as time went on, found ourselves more and more disillusioned with the lack of transformation that we experience in our own hearts and in those around us. Really frustrated and disillusioned with the emotionalism and the hyper-sensational environment that we knew to be church. And so just a lot of frustration and really no direction, not really sure what to do about that. Understanding and loving, we had a deep love for the church, and knew that God loved us, and we love the Lord, but just really pretty worn out, to be honest with you. And in 2004, shortly after my wife and I were married, God sent a guy who became a dear brother named Mike. He was a military pilot, moved into town, and started attending our church for some reason. And, over lunch one day, sat down after being friends for several months, sat down with me at lunch and said, "Kevin, I don't think you know the gospel. I think you know it, but I don't believe you understand it." And I was offended and felt pretty defensive, but God used Mike to break through my blindness and my walls and the bondage of legalism that I was in, and over the next year, opened my eyes to the beauty of the gospel, the truth of the gospel. And for the first time in my life, as I read scripture, it just came alive to me in ways that it never had. I began to see the beauty of how God had revealed himself in scripture and purposed to save a people. Mike also introduced me to Reformed theology. So for the next several years, I read voraciously dozens of books, listened to hundreds of sermons by Reformed pastors around the country, men that I grew to love and respect, and just to learn and glean from so much. In 2008, we found ourselves just no longer compatible and able to serve this particular body, even though my mom and dad had gone through a very similar change right behind me. God opening their eyes to the gospel, then them becoming reformed, my father reading different authors, changing his preaching style from topical to expository, moving through quite just a miraculous transformation. Our church, while many followed, and God did an amazing work in them, not all of them. And in the end, my father and I both resigned in early 2008. I took my young family, went to the West Coast, and quickly got plugged into an Acts 29 church. I took a job as a marketing director of a large real estate company, and we just began to sit under the ministry of the word and hear reformed and gospel-centered preaching. For really, in that way, it was a unique experience in our lives. The pastor there quickly pulled me into with about 11 other guys, pulled me into an elder training where he just pretty intensively for 18 months, we studied systematic theology, biblical theology, church history, and this pastor just poured into us. He's a very gifted man, is a very gifted man. So I read and learned, and I feel like it was just such a formative time in my life for God to just open my eyes even further and give me just a grid to understand scripture, understand genres of literature in the Bible. So really just changed the way that I read the Bible and understood God. So as God was working in these areas, one of the things that became very clear in my mind is that while I loved Reformed theology, and I did and do, I understood the importance for me, and I believe Christians, to have the gospel be central in their lives. And so I've heard it put before in this way: Reformed theology is the frame that holds the lens of the gospel in place. Theology is important, but ultimately the gospel is what we desire for people to know and understand. And I do believe that Reformed theology helps to enlighten and to bring clarity to the truth and the power of the gospel. But I am not out to make people Reformed or Calvinistic or whatever. That is not my goal. That's not the flag I wave. I'm even now serving in a Presbyterian church, a PCA church, and we encounter people quite often who just want to see everyone become disciples of Calvin, and that is not my goal or desire. I want to see people be disciples of Jesus. So in 2009, there was a man who graduated from RTS Charlotte. He was Baptistic. He moved out to the West Coast, and we became friends. And Sean asked me to plant a church with him. At the time, I had just started my own business, my own marketing company. I have a young family, and starting a church, planting a church sounded like a lot of work. And so I was not immediately amiable to the idea, and took some time, but eventually I agreed, and Redeemer Church was planted in 2009, and the Lord just blessed those years. For about 8 years, we served there and watched the Lord do such miraculous things, bringing people to faith and forming a body of believers that was so sweet and so precious. In 2015, my business unfortunately took a nosedive, and we did not have the means. I at the time had 12 employees, and we needed to find them other jobs and kind of farm out the people that I had hired after some years of success. But the Lord just brought that to an end, and it was a very confusing time. We weren't sure why or what the Lord was doing, but it just went from being very prosperous to not being very prosperous. And we fought pretty hard to stay in California and to stay at our church that we loved. But in the end, we realized that, we realized that the Lord was up to something. And so we decided that if we were going to move away and kind of start over, that I really desired to be in vocational ministry. So I began applying to some churches. That brought us to Rapid City, South Dakota, to South Canyon Baptist Church. At the time, they were affiliated with the NAB, the North American Baptist, but they, during my time there, moved to the SBC. That also was a sweet place. So a couple things happened that are important about that time. One of the things is that ministry, my wife and I tell people still that we feel like we arrived on the scene and just reaped 65 years of people's prayer and labor for the gospel. And so we kind of came, and they were sweet and kind to us. And we just experienced an incredible move of the Lord and growth, and both numerically and in depth. The church grew very, very rapidly. I was over the small groups ministry that I started there, and just watched God bring people, small group leaders from amazing places that I respected. Bethlehem Baptist Church in Minneapolis, and even we got a couple of people from Seattle, from Mars Hill, that had been a part of everything that had happened and had come and moved to Rapid City, South Dakota. Some folks from California. So just some really well-equipped, well-discipled people that became small group leaders, and the Lord just blessed that entire thing. And at the same time, my marriage was not doing well. We were experiencing, I think, the repercussions of years of my working long hours and neglecting time at home with my kids and my wife, and just habits that I developed of unhealth. And so I went to a conference in January of 2018, a worship conference, spent some time, about a week, doing a worship intensive with someone, a mentor of mine that has really blessed my life and has walked with me for many years as a spiritual father. And I spoke to him about what was going on in my life at the time, and he just said, "Kevin, I think if you don't take a step back from ministry and get some counseling and heal and sit under the ministry of the word, that you won't have a ministry and you won't have a marriage." And so those words were hard to hear, and I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. But I went back home and told my wife, and this just really resonated with her. And we decided to resign in August of 2018 and move to Louisville, Kentucky, to sit under the ministry of the word. And my mentor, the spiritual father, lived there, and he and his wife really just poured into us and counseled us for about 18 months. After about 18 months, I was raring to go and really wanting to be serving in ministry again. I had questions about whether or not I should go back into ministry. And I really submitted those to my leaders and pastors, and with their blessing, began to look. There was a couple who had gone to our church in Rapid City, South Dakota, who had transferred through their job. The husband had transferred down to San Antonio, Texas, and they were attending Christ Church. He reached out to me and put me in touch with the pastor of Christ Church, and we began to talk. and really felt like our visions and theology aligned in so many ways. And eventually, after about 6 months of an interview process, I was offered the position. And in 2020, January of 2020, my family and I moved to San Antonio, Texas, and took this position. It's been a great blessing. I know that you'll have questions about why we're leaving and why we're looking to leave, which I'm happy to answer. So Brock, I hope this helps you, and it's about 15 minutes long, and I hope this helps to just kind of give you a picture and an idea of who I am in my life, and I look forward to talking with you this afternoon. Thanks.